Open any business magazine today, and you'll hear the exact same playbook. To build a massive company, you need venture capital, you need to disrupt a legacy industry, and ideally, you need to pivot to AI. But then there is a physical, brick-and-mortar retail company in Singapore. No algorithms, no tech pivots, just a business generating over $1.3 billion a year in revenue, with a market cap north of $3 billion. It competes directly against well-funded, government-linked supermarket chains that have been established for decades, and it wins. It turns out market dominance doesn't require a slick pitch deck. Sometimes the most devastatingly effective strategy is hiding in plain sight. The founder of this empire had no MBA, zero retail experience, and absolutely no business plan. Because before he was a billionaire, Lim Hock Chi spent his childhood at his family's Changxiang pig farm. Every day after school, he cleaned pigsties, he mixed pig feed. Homework came after the chores were done, and play rarely happened at all. Even today, he drives a Bentley only because his younger brother bought it for him. He lives in a large house, but calls the pool useless and the gym boring. He would rather go for a hike. So how did a man with a background in pig farming, armed with a $30,000 loan, build Singapore's third-largest supermarket chain? And how did he do it by choosing the most boring path possible at every single turn? In 1985, the Singapore government began phasing out pig farming. The country was rapidly developing, and the land was needed for massive urbanization projects. Almost overnight, the Lim family's entire livelihood was wiped out. They had too many pigs and no farm. Instead of panicking, Lim Hock Chi walked into a local provision store in Ang Mo Kio and struck a deal. He rented a tiny corner of the shop just to sell their chilled pork and clear out the excess stock before it rotted. Then, the owner of that provision store ran into severe financial trouble and needed to sell the business. Lim borrowed $30,000 from his father, and instead of walking away from retail, he bought the failing shop outright. That was the very first Changxiang store. There was no grand vision to build a retail empire. It was a purely pragmatic move to solve an immediate problem. They adopted an aggressive pricing strategy. By stripping away all the frills and operating on razor-thin margins, they forced a high-volume economic model. They sold goods for 10 cents cheaper than the competition, letting the sheer number of sales do the heavy lifting. And they backed up those margins with intense physical effort. When customers bought heavy items, Lim and his brothers would personally carry the bags up the stairs of the local HDB blocks, the massive public housing apartment buildings where most Singaporeans live. By 1995, Lim did something entirely new. He took the concept of a traditional wet market, an open-air space where locals buy fresh meat, seafood, and produce from individual stalls, and placed it entirely inside a modern, air-conditioned supermarket. He gave the aunties doing the shopping exactly what they wanted, with better lighting and a cooler climate. This combination of extreme customer understanding and raw physical labor built a protective economic moat. The big, sterile supermarket chains simply couldn't compete with that level of personalized hustle. Between 2000 and 2005, the broader economy stalled out. Singapore was hit by the lingering aftermath of the Asian financial crisis, the burst of the dot-com bubble, and the severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, outbreak. Businesses everywhere were closing their doors. Major retail competitors retreated to cut costs. As a direct result, commercial rental prices crashed across the country. While everyone else was playing it safe, Lim Hock Chi opened 14 new stores. He aggressively signed leases in out-of-the-way, quiet neighborhoods. These were spots the bigger chains had completely passed over because they didn't look profitable enough on paper. He knew that when overhead is cheap and the rest of the market is paralyzed by fear, that is exactly when you expand. Fast forward to today, and Changxiang operates more than 70 outlets. It is a publicly listed company, and in 2021, it posted record-breaking profits. But what made headlines that year wasn't the revenue, it was the payout. The company announced staff bonuses of up to 16-month salary. They gave this to regular employees, with even part-time staff receiving nearly 5 months of extra pay. A year later, when a fresh wave of COVID hit the workforce, staff inevitably called in sick, so the billionaire CEO and his wife woke up at 5 a.m., went to the stores, and spent the morning stocking shelves and clearing carts. That kind of leadership isn't something you can easily put on a spreadsheet. It becomes the cultural bedrock that keeps a company alive when things get difficult. It all traces back to the pig farm. Lim learned early on that when there is a mess in front of you, you don't call a strategy meeting, you don't send a memo, just show up and clean it. If you're running a provision shop, a logistics route, a hawker stall, or a cleaning service right now, it is easy to feel invisible next to the flashy startups pulling in all the press. But remember that one of the largest retail empires in Southeast Asia was built by a man who spent his teenage years knee-deep in pig feed. He never confused his wealth with his identity, and he never felt the need to make his business sound more glamorous than it actually was. Running a boring business isn't a problem. Quitting it is. You don't always need a better story to succeed. Sometimes you just need a small loan, a counter to sell from, and the willingness to carry the bags upstairs yourself when nobody else is watching.